Hi, I'm Dr. Ellen, the Midlife Whisperer, and I hear you and I've got you. Think of me as the one-stop shop for all your midlife needs. I'm a psychologist, registered dietitian, nutritionist, board-certified health and wellness coach, and mindful self-compassion teacher. I'm also an author and podcast host with over 30 years of experience empowering midlife women. Hey everybody, Dr. Ellen here, the Midlife Whisperer. Hope you are having a great day, and I am so thrilled to have you here. If you're a new listener, welcome, and if you're returning, thank you so much for joining us today. We have an awesome show for all of you out there who are fur moms, fur dads, have pet babies. We're going to be talking all about the joy and the power of pets. Personally, I have been a fur moms that we say for probably the last couple of decades. I have had a huge variety of animals, and they have had such a huge impact on my life. And I think one of the things that's so interesting is that there's been such an uptick of people having pets since COVID. I guess back in September, I was in New York City and I was just amazed. Like everybody had a dog. And I was on the, I guess what used to be Hell's Kitchen, sort of Midtown West, on the West Side. And there were all of these like pet boutiques and various kinds of like pet play places, and just pets were everywhere. And according to a 2021-2022 survey conducted by the American Pet Products Association, they found that 70% of households own a pet. And among the 70%, there are 69 million U.S. households that own a dog, compared to 45.3 million households that own a cat. So more of us have dogs than cats. But what's so fascinating is that according to a Forbes survey, 78% of pet owners acquired pets during the pandemic, compared to only 17% of pet owners adopting a new pet before 2020. So I think that we were really lonely. We needed like physical touch. We needed like comfort. We needed a source of unconditional love, support, comfort. And there's just so much amazing research that pets do it all. They reduce loneliness. They increase feelings of social support. They boost our mood. They decrease stress. They decrease anxiety. They improve heart health, and they help kids with emotional and social skills. And today we're talking with two animal experts who are going to share their passion for pets. We're talking with animal communicator, psychic, and medium Nancy Mello, and pet therapy dog advocate Larry Grogan. And they're going to help you learn how to better understand and connect with your pets, and even inspire you to learn how to work with your pet to help others. And as someone who teaches self-compassion, is really interested in neuroscience, I'm a little bit of a neuroscience geek. It's so interesting. Just staring at your dog actually increases your level of oxytocin, which is the mammalian chemical of care and connection. And it increases oxytocin for your dog too. And it's so interesting because humans and dogs actually co-evolved together. Approximately 33,000 years ago, what's I think started happening, the general theory is that like dogs were hanging outside the tribe where people were, habitating, and they were kind of getting the refuse, the garbage that people were taking outside, the campfire. And over time, they slowly got like closer and closer to the people. And what happened is, I think people really discovered, and dogs discovered, that, we could really cohabit very successfully together. So, the archaeological records beginning about 15,000 years ago clearly show that dogs were super important to people. And some people even theorize that they were one of the reasons that sapiens became the dominant species of humanoids that were around at the time. Dogs were our sentinels. They were our shepherds, our hunting partners. These days, they help us with therapy. They're our dearest friends, and they even can detect cancer. So It's amazing. I know myself, I like to call my current pet baby Rosie. She's like the Goldilocks of dogs. She's a border collie. And I actually was so fortunate to have her in my life because my fiance Ken already had her. So I got this beautiful 3-year-old, gorgeous border collie. Border collies are an amazing breed. They need a ton of exercise. So she keeps me in shape. She loves to climb trees. She literally can like jump up like 13 feet. She thinks she can get the squirrels, but she's cool. I called her the Goldilocks of of dogs because she's a great size. She's like 35 pounds. So she's not too big. She's not too small. She's not too barky, but she's a fantastic watchdog. If anybody comes up the driveway or cars go by, she's always letting us know. She is so affectionate, but she's not emotionally needy. You know, as long as she's got stuff to do and exercise, she is an awesome, awesome dog. So I'm really looking forward to diving right in with our next guest, Nancy Mello, and getting some tips on how I can be a better fur mom and learn to communicate with Rosie. And if you're watching, Nancy has got her cat there, which is awesome. I love cats too. I think cats are just such an easy pet. I had a beautiful fur baby cat, Athena, prior to Rosie, who is just so intuitive and wonderful. So let me introduce Nancy Mello for you. She has been called amazing, absolutely incredible, spot on. You saved my life. Those are few of the things people have used to describe her and her clients' experience. She is a psychic medium, an animal intuitive, an animal communicator, and a clairvoyant who has worked with pets and people in over 62 countries and found over 121 pets since March of 2020. She has been featured in Cosmopolitan UK, the Washington Post, and Dog Star magazine for her work with end-of-life pets. And she has a mission to fund scientific research to understand how those with intuitive abilities use their brain differently. And she's going to share both how she became a psychic, and also she's going to give us some ideas about what we could do to connect more fully with our pets. Welcome to Rock Your Midlife, Nancy. So good to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
And who are you with today? For those of us who are watching on, on YouTube and the Facebook Live, who do you have there?
This is Prim, one of our 2 cats. So we have Prim, and then her sister is Katniss. So she is a tortoiseshell and tortie, and in every sense of the word, she has tortitude. So if you were watching live, you might have seen me kind of furrow my brows a little bit when Dr. Ellen, you said that cats were easy, because if anyone's ever owned a tortie, they are not easy, huh, kitten? So they're a lot of fun. But yes, thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you here, and welcome your cat as well. So I'm curious, we've got kind of 2 threads going here, your connection with animals and also your understanding as a psychic. And I was doing some research on you and realized you actually come from a line of people who have intuitive gifts. Tell us a little bit about how you discovered your psychic and intuitive abilities.
I was 6 years old, and my grandmother had recently passed, and I was, as 6-year-olds do, I was trying to remember her, and I remember just thinking, oh, she had passed, and it was now Christmas, and I was, she gave me these toys in the 80s. They were called omegals. They were like big building blocks, but you could put them together, and I said, oh, she gave me omegals, and immediately I heard in my head, clear as day, all you remember about me are those expletive omegals. And I was like, so I ran and I told my mom, Mom, I just heard grandma in my head, and this is what she said. And my mom took one look at me and said, okay, and marched us off to the doctor. And that led to the next 12 years of being under a lot of psychiatric care, a lot of medications. I think, at least 20 different medications, lots of wonderful, in quotation, diagnoses, anything from bipolar to borderline, schizophrenia. And it was a tough time to be a child, especially in the early 80s, when you have these abilities. And it was interesting because I grew up in a very small town in Northern California. Both sides of my family are farmers. I am 50% Portuguese. So my family is very traditional. Only the third generation here on the mainland in the States. And so, of course, when word got around that I was different in the small town of 700, it was a lot of backlash. And Catholicism told me I was crazy. Catholicism told me I had demons in me, and lots of unpleasant memories, I would say. Interestingly enough, throughout all of this, throughout all the treatments, throughout all of this of the care that I was given, my abilities never stopped. They just kind of went in a box. I'll never forget after one of my suicidal attempts, because of course I thought there was something wrong with me. And I remember writing in my journal and saying, I'm still hearing the voices, as I called them, but I know they're not real now. And I wrote that down, and immediately I heard in my head, we are real. So for a 16-year-old to hear that, it was like, oh my God, it took me honestly until I reached my midlife to really come to terms with it, come to terms with who I am as a person. All of this information about my coming from a line of it, that stuff was all hidden to me, even hidden to some of my family. I didn't know my great great grandfather was a founder of a healing church in actually where Anaheim is now in Southern California. But I learned that from ancestry.com. Honestly, this was history that I don't think my family wanted to bring forth. They didn't want to encourage it. My great grandfather, so his son, had shock treatments and went into a psychiatric hospital. And this is in the early 1900s. So again, you had this wonderful line, but this information was hidden until much later. I'll never forget when I was 18, my aunt, my mom's sister, took me out for lunch and said, those abilities, I have them too, but we keep them quiet. So in other words, I was taught that it was only acceptable if I didn't talk about it, if I didn't express it.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And I'm so sorry for what you went through. And it is really true. Parents don't know what to do. And they think that it's maybe schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or all kinds of things. So I'm so glad that you were able to overcome that. How did you rip the mask off?
I was living the cookie colored life. I was on my second marriage. I call my first marriage my starter marriage. I was on my second marriage to an active duty service member, and I was playing the part. I thought that if I just did all of the right things, that I would be happy. I still suffered from horrendous anxiety and depression. And I, every couple of years, I would attempt suicide again. I would try and give up because I always just felt innately like I did not belong, that there was something innately wrong with me, because I became the friend that would know things for the people that I would share it with. And so it became this, it was like I was wearing a cloak the whole time. For anyone that's familiar with military and families, you are taught to not upset the service member, to not do anything to rock the boat, literally and figuratively, that you do not cause anything to cause our military members stress, because then that hurts the needs of the military. So it was very hush hush. I remember when I was dating my husband, I told him at one point, I have these abilities, and he's like, yeah, okay, because he was an engineer. I was like, yeah, okay, sure. So it took me going and attempting suicide. Actually, I went to go throw myself in front of a train, and I had on my favorite dinosaur Santa hat pajamas, and I realized I just couldn't live with myself anymore with these, again, going back to these abilities of knowing that I had them, of knowing that I knew things. I knew things about my kids. I knew things about the animals. I knew things, but my whole life I'd been convinced that it was utterly wrong. And every example of what a psychic was, or forget what an animal communicator was, because we didn't even talk about those, but what a psychic was Miss Cleo, right? That's all we knew was this ethereal kind of person. And here I am, a marathon.
Like 1-800 psychic, right?
Call I'm very, I trip over my own shoes. Like, come on. Like, I'm so not, this beautiful, graceful, even though that's what my name means, ironically, this beautiful, graceful being. Like, I'm chaos. I'm a klutz. I am so beyond anything. And I remember sitting there in 20-degree weather. We're actually coming up on my 4-year anniversary. And I sat there in the dark, 2:00 in the morning. I hadn't taken my phone, and I'm sitting there waiting for the train to come. And I couldn't do it. I just started screaming in the air. Why am I like this? Why? And I heard the answer, because you need to do this. And I just said, you've picked the wrong person, universe. Like, you've picked it. I start yelling at my aunt, who had since passed. I said, I know you're here. And I could feel her. And I just said, but I don't want this. And I just felt her hands on me saying, you need to do this. And I said, I'm introverted. I hate rejection. I'm a military spouse. Like, I am trying to play by the rules. And the universe is saying, throw that out the window. And it was around that time that I realized I had a choice. I really did. I could either throw myself in front of a train and that would be that. And my kids would be okay and life would go on. But if I could help one person, then all of that crap that I went through would be worth it. So I turned around and I went home. My spouse was waiting up for me. And he said, you need help? And I said, yeah, I do. I went to call my counselor to get committed somewhere. And I just had this brainstorm. I just knew what I needed to do. So my spouse went back to bed when he was ensuring that I was safe and I was okay. And instead, I went and researched cheapest websites and I spent $100 on a website and I put it under a pseudonym. The first year I didn't, because I didn't want to hurt my spouse. Again, I didn't want to hurt the career. And he woke up and I said, hey, honey, I've just spent $100 on a website. I need to do this. And he looked at me and he said, okay. And he turned around and walked away. And I'm sure he thought, I'm never going to see that money again. Okay. What, and within months of starting a website and starting to help people, my depression and anxiety, while it didn't completely vanish, it lifted to very normal levels that a mom, that a spouse would feel for what way you, and this is of course pre-COVID anxiety levels. So the rest is history. I very early on in my journey being open, I knew that as soon as I started helping people, as soon as I started talking about it, and I lost some family. I'm going to be honest. We don't speak to a large portion of our family, of both sides of our family to this day, because it is easier for people to turn their backs on something that they are afraid of or that makes them uncomfortable. And that's okay. And I used to take that very personally, but I realized that I know, as long as I'm doing this, and I made myself a promise in the very beginning, that as long as I did this to the best of my abilities, that I was doing this to help people, that I'm not doing this to get a second house in Maine, that I'm not doing this to go, whatever, that I'm doing this for the good of people, that I'm checking my ego. As long as I'm doing this to help people and animals, then I will continue to do it. And as long as I can honor my gift, I will do it. But I have to make sure it's on my terms, which means I'm going to be completely honest and vulnerable. I'm not going to give you a facade. I'm not Miss Cleo. I literally just posted a clip on Instagram last night. I don't know if anyone caught it. In my stories, I had a client say, I'm not brave. I can't, anything that if I think I'm going to get embarrassed, I can't do it. And I turned around and we just got back from our first trip since COVID, and I was singing karaoke very off key. And I said, if you can do it, if I can do this, you can do it. And I was sharing with the world a karaoke version, very, very off key. In fact, people actually left when I was singing, and I admitted it, because this is me. And this is the only way I can do this, that I can fully help people. I
want to just first interrupt you because I want to get to your abilities. But first of all, just super thank you for sharing, because I always tell women at midlife, it's like the thing you've got to do is you've got to be authentic. And the world teaches us that you have to like dress a certain way, look a certain way, act a certain way. And we spend our whole lives creating, like, as you said, this facade. I did the same thing, having the perfect family and what I did for a living. And I had more, getting degree after degree. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you go, I can't live like this anymore. So thank you for having the bravery to share that. And I want to get a little bit into the, animal communication piece. How did you realize that your gift was to use your psychic clairvoyant abilities to connect with animals?
The same way, where we grew up on a farm and I connected with animals. And my mom even said, animals that need help seem to find you. So it was in this journey of my website and starting to help people, it was like kind of pulling off the Band-Aid with telling people that I could talk to dead people. And then after about a year and a half, it was like, yeah, I can talk to animals too. So it was that. And what I found interesting is again, you are called, where you are needed is where you'll be called, and you just can't resist it, right? The more you resist it, the more the universe is going to bang on your door. And so it was some random February, right before COVID. And I got a message saying, we've lost a dog. And I said, I don't do that. And they said, well, he's diabetic. Please, anything. And I said, okay. And we found him a day later. And Ollie is my first dog that I found. And even when I did that, I was like, holy crow. Oh, okay. Okay. So again, it's speaking with animals. It was because it was called to me. So for instance, the first animal that I helped cross over, it was a client's dog that was ready to go. And she wanted and said, does she have anything to say to me? And I started realizing when I talked to Cleo, the first dog I spoke to, was that Cleo had things to say. Cleo wanted to go chase the seagulls on the beach one last time. Cleo wanted certain things done before she passed. She wanted to pass in the yard. There were certain things that she wanted. And so it went from Cleo, just like with Ollie, to another animal, to another animal. And so I truly feel like ministers or like other people, I truly feel that this is a calling, that I am being called to do it with animals and people. And so everything that happens, every kind of different kind of little bit of a V in the road as far as how to help animals, it's truly because it's being asked of me. And
No, I'm curious how you communicate with animals, because animals don't have language the way that we do. So is it, do you get like a smell or a vision or a sound? How does the communication, it's not like the voice that you had in your younger days.
Actually, it is very
Does it show up?
It's a train of thought. So
Mhm.
it sounds just like my consciousness, except I'm not the one telling you to open the blinds because you haven't opened them since yesterday. I just got off the phone with some cats, and a cat, and the cat said, I need the hanging balls. The cat kept saying, you moved it, the hanging balls. Well, it turns out they just took down their Christmas tree. So I'm not thinking about hanging balls, right? I don't know what hanging balls, but they were talking about the ornaments. They wanted the ornaments back on the tree. So I will hear it just like a stream of consciousness. So just like I need milk and eggs at the grocery store, that's how I hear animals as well. So it depends. I don't like to use an intelligence as a word, but the more consciousness they have, the more perhaps I'll get images similar to a daydream and words. So for instance, horses, I'll get a lot of images and words and descriptive. Whereas I've talked to fish, and fish, I'll get images, skinks. I love working with bearded dragons, beardies, lots of images, but they still feel 100%. They feel. There was a skink that I was speaking to, and I'd actually been speaking to the dog, and they were like, well, can you speak to the skink? And I always say, I'll try. And the skink said that there was a plant that I didn't know was there because I didn't see the container, that the plant was blocking the TV. And the skink like the box, something about like the box with the lights. And I was like the box with lights, the TV. The skink wanted to see the lights. Again, this is stuff that I hear it like a train of thought, and images are like a daydream.
So if someone's listening and they want to connect and communicate more with their pets, where do we start? So I want to communicate with Rosie. May I get a sense that, she's really clear. She'll stare at the basket that contains her toys. She loves to play tug. She'll come over and stick her nose, under my arm when she wants to be pet. She'll, jump on the bed when she wants to be comforted and wants to hang out with us while we're sleeping. Beyond that, how do I get, into that? Because I believe everybody's got intuitive psychic abilities. It's just that we don't develop them. But if somebody's listening going, God, I really want to understand my pet, where do we start?
Just listen. So I have an exercise that I tell people to do is you can, you find a quiet room, where you're not distracted, and you look into their eyes. And you start with very basic questions. Are you in pain? Are you hurt? And I actually have like a real short little meditations that you can do on my website that kind of starts this. But it's like, you could just ask her, what do you want? And then trust the answer. as asinine as it is, if you see a fish, what the hell? Write it down. Start writing it down or putting it in your phone. Trust the answer that's given. That's it. Is you just look, and if you don't get anything, then reset, come back. Like don't put pressure on yourself. I find that, if I went, I'm a psychic, if I did that, I'm not gonna hear anything. It's very much a flow state, similar to meditation, where you just allow the thoughts and the images to come. And like one thing you do in meditation is, if thoughts are coming, they say, just let them flow like a cloud. Very similar with hearing what your animals are saying, is you just look at them. Like if I looked at Prim right now and I said, what do you need? The first thing I hear is leave me alone. She's trying to sleep. So the first thing I'm hearing is leave me alone. Right? I didn't make that up. I didn't say, it's just what I hear. So it's just looking at them. What do you need? So she's looking at the basket. Instead of you can ask them out loud, but try it here. Like look in their eyes and say, what do you need? And if you don't get anything, show her in your mind. You can picture, let's say she has a red ball. Show her the red ball. Do you want this? And trust, yes or no. First answer you get, yes or no. Do you want the yellow banana? Yes, no. You could even do that. But I just think, just go and just say, what do you need? You can even do this when you're away. When I was traveling recently, my kids, who get such a kick out of my abilities, they said, well, can you check on the animals? Can you check on the animals? It's a very, very similar premise where you just close your eyes, you connect with them, you say their name, and you say, are you okay? You can send messages to them. I will be home after 2, you can use a visual, 2 darks, 2 nights. I will be home when the leaves are falling. Use a visual. It can help.
Yeah, animals are pretty amazing. I always hear these stories about how animals know when their people are coming home. So they'll be like waiting at the door, 15 minutes before the owner gets there. They know that. So we've talked a little bit about how we read animals. How do they read us?
Very similar, where it's a mixture of body language. So scientifically, you can say, for instance, like they've proven with the time thing, that they can tell time by the sense of smell leaving. So how can they tell what's going on with us? It's a mixture of intuition themselves, ESP, if you want, where they can actually tell, like, this is what you need. And also body language, behavior, again, hormonal changes. There's lots of things that we don't even do. It's interesting when I'm working with pets, I remember when I was pregnant, we went and swam with the dolphins. I remember asking, and this is before I exercised any of my abilities. And I said, oh, I'm pregnant. Is that going to be okay? And they said, no, the dolphins will know you're pregnant before you do. Because again, but it's so, and this is where I like to get into the scientific stuff. And I'd love to be able to prove more of what I'm hearing. And this is where I always have an open door for like other pets to talk about, or other vets, excuse me, I'm hearing my dog bark, other vets to talk about like, why am I hearing this? Or what do they mean? But it's like little slight hormone fluctuations that they can smell, or even sounds that they can hear that we can't outside of our range, that let them know what we're going through, especially with loss. Like I find, and I've been working with this a lot lately, where you have one pet that passes and you have one that's at least one that stayed behind. There is a sense of smell that, and they've said this, there's like a death smell similar, where there's a sense of smell where they seem to understand. I had talked to a cat yesterday that was terrified that she was going next. And so we had to work and say, no, you're strong, everything's okay. But she was so scared. Oh my gosh. And I think it's more of a smell.
Yeah, such interesting stuff. So we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more with Nancy about what we can do to connect with our pets. And then we're also going to talk with Larry Grogan, and he is on a mission to quadruple the number of certified pet therapy teams in the United States. And we've gotten a taste of just how powerful that animal connection is. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're listening to Rock Your Midlife. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Rock Your Midlife. I'm Dr. Ellen, the Midlife Whisperer. If you want to get in touch with me, just head on over to themidlifewhisperer.com. That's themidlifewhisperer.com. And we were having such an amazing time talking with Nancy Mello about how she communicates with animals. And now we're going to keep on the pet theme, and we're going to talk with Larry Grogan. He is president of an investment firm. He's an author. He's a speaker, and he is a pet therapy dog advocate. He's on a mission to quadruple the number of certified pet therapy teams in the United States, which I think is such a powerful mission to have. Welcome to Rock Your Midlife, Larry. Awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join both of you.
Yes, it's so good to have you. And where in the world are you? I didn't ask you that before we started today.
I'm actually on holiday on a tiny little island off the coast of North Carolina called Bald Head Island.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, before we dive into what pet therapy is, how it can help people, what we can do if we're thinking about, becoming a team with our pet, I know you've got a question for Nancy. So go ahead and fire away.
Yeah, Nancy, number one, amazing story. And I'm grateful that you're still with us because I think what you're doing is absolutely beautiful. What I want to understand is, do animals reach out to you?
I want to pause because I want to say this not correctly, but yes and no. So I joke that if I was on all the time, I would be exhausted. I joke that I watch The Real Housewives to decompress, and that's how I turn off. I love reality TV. That's where I can my mind turns off. So they can. I'm really very careful about respecting people's privacy. I remember after, unfortunately, when the Queen passed not too long ago, I had people reach out and say, talk about the corgis. And I said, I can't, I won't do that. So for instance, if it's a pet, I have a wonderful client that's turned into a friend that has chickens. She trusts me with everything. And if she's just chatting with me and she talks about, oh, I had to feed them this morning. Oh, I'll hear them immediately. I'll hear them chirp in and say, we want the worms, or we want. So yes, but it's almost after that permission. But I'll do duets on TikTok and on social media. I want to be very careful because I never want to reveal anything. I'm not one, my spouse calls it psychically handsy when I have a couple drinks and then I go, hey, your dad has a message for you. Very similar, where I'm very careful to respect people's privacy. So it hasn't happened yet in the sense of a dog down the street. However, if someone stopped me and said, oh my God, my dog's hurt, blah, blah, blah. Yes. But I'm very careful about ensuring that whatever I do doesn't violate, the first and foremost is their trust with their owner. I will not get in the way of that. And I have to have permission from the owner because I'm connecting with the pet through the owner. It's very similar to wild animals, whereas with wild animals, I can get a sense of, it's very much more instinctual. I'm scared, I'm running, I'm this. But with animals, it's more, again, that working with that connection from the person.
So interesting. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about pet therapy, which I'm so excited to get into. I had a Portuguese water dog a number of years ago, and I was like, she was like a Kleenex with paws, and I was thinking Sizzle would have been the perfect dog to be a pet therapy dog. Actually, the only Portuguese water dog who didn't like to swim. She hated to swim, loved people, would just bond with anybody. My current dog I think she's a little too high energy to do that. But let's talk about what exactly is pet therapy.
Well, pet therapy is the interaction of someone in need, let's say, and the animal itself. So for us, Scrappy and I were a team for 8 years. And we went to a children's hospital. So we would visit with the children first, then the medical staff, and then anyone else that wanted just to love on Scrappy a little bit. And what that does, you mentioned oxytocin earlier, and that's a hormone that the body releases when we're relaxed. And that's really the idea, to allow that animal to take your mind off of whatever is troubling you, whether it's pain, suffering, something mental, whatever the case might be, and put you in a different frame of mind. And when that oxytocin begins to flow throughout your body, there's other hormones as well. You just find a new state of being, and you become a little bit relaxed, and you begin to just accept what's around you at that point in time. But that's the beauty of pet therapy, and dogs in particular for me are really what is the best medicine.
It's so interesting, and it's kind of bridging the conversation we had with Nancy, because there's so much incredible research. Literally, playing with your pet shifts your vibration. So we can like talk about
Yeah.
the woo of it, but we can talk about how it raises oxytocin. We talked about lowers cortisol. So essentially what you're doing, and I'll tell people all the time, if you're feeling out of sorts, you want to shift your vibe. For me, it's music, dancing, and playing with pets, or or getting out in nature. But what happens is you go from the parasympathetic fight and flight response, where you're all stressed out, you're feeling all out of sorts, you're anxious, and you go into the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest nervous system. And there is a ton of research to actually show that blood pressure is reduced, cortisol levels are reduced, oxytocin is increased. So this isn't, I love how, woo is starting to overlap with the scientific research. So we've talked a lot about, medical benefits, about stress reduction, helping your heart, helping you deal with stress. How do you become a pet therapy team? Because I played with this a little bit. It felt like the work that needed to be done was pretty hard. So if someone's thinking, listening, going, I've got a good dog. I've got one of those, I think labs are really awesome. I would think there's certain breeds are better. How do we start exploring that? What are the best breeds? Can you use other animals? Fill us in, Larry.
Yeah, I teach people there's 4 phases to becoming a team, and team is the important part. First is to evaluate. Is your dog friendly, not only to humans, but to other animals? Does it get excited around human beings? And just make sure that that attraction exists. The second one is to train. Pet therapy is not as difficult as a lot of people think it is, but it is time consuming because you must train your dog. And the training for pet therapy is really more basic obedience than anything else. Sit, stay, come. There are some tweaks that have to be taken into consideration. So for a lot of dogs, one of the training exercises would be they would put a hot dog on the floor, and you would have to walk within a few feet of the hot dog. And what they don't want to see is the dog lunge for the hot dog. So you teach your dog to leave it, leave it, leave it as you go walking by. And hopefully they'll just ignore it over the course of time. But it's just like anything else, it's repetition of that exercise. For Scrappy, her biggest challenge was called separation, where someone had to hold her and I had to leave the room out of sight for 3 to 4 minutes. And they don't want the dog to get over anxious and begin to cry or try to get away from whoever's holding them. So what I would do with her is I'd take a friend and we'd go to a Lowe's hardware store. And my friend would hold her. I'd walk down the aisle and then go around the corner and look at my clock for 3 or 4 minutes and then come back the other side of the aisle. And that did a couple of things. Number one, it just reinforced the fact that I'm going to disappear for a little bit, but the most important thing is I'm going to come back. And so what you're doing is you're building the confidence in your dog to understand that, yeah, I'm going to be out of sight for a while, but I'm going to come right back to you. So there's no need to panic. And so that was really some of the challenging things that we had to overcome. But for Scrappy, she was that type of dog that just wanted to please. She wanted to make sure that I was happy with her. And so that was never a major problem, but it was just one of those things from a training perspective that we had to overcome. But the most important thing is really the obedience. Your dog must stay with you. You're always on a leash with your dog, even when you're visiting. And so those are the important things to understand, that it's really just a lot of obedience. They'll throw some quirky things in once in a while, whether it's the hot dog or separation or banging pots and pans. For us, because we were in a hospital, sometimes alarms go off. And so they don't want the dog to be afraid when they hear things like that. And so you have to know where you're going to be visiting and what the expectations are. And then once you go through the training, the certification process is just validating all the training that you did. And then the last phase is to engage, get out there and be a part of that community, because the demand is so high, but the supply of pet therapy teams is extremely low.
A good tip. So make sure you've got a dog, first of all, that is the right temperament. Like I always say, my dog Sizzle would have been great. Rosie, not so much. She likes people, but she's just too high energy. She just, like, if there's a squirrel, forget about it.
And in time, that may change.
Yeah.
It may be an age thing as well.
And then, do the basic obedience. And I know you have to pass an exam. So you mentioned why is there such a demand? Where do we need more pet therapy?
Well, the answer to the first question, why, is a lot of what we've just come out of, and that was the COVID experience. And you mentioned at the very beginning, the demand for pets just really accelerated during those COVID years because people were lonely. And that was one of the solutions for ourselves to overcome our own loneliness, our own anxiety, was to have a pet, because that pet requires us to take care of something. And so that animal now has expectations of us. And so that really hasn't changed too much. If you think about it, particularly on the school age children and young adults, there's nearly 20 million college students in the United States. And of that 20 million, 65% have expressed overwhelming anxiety. And so these are the young adults that came out of COVID, and now they're entering school systems that are different, it's unique, it's more demanding. But during that COVID period, they lost some of their socialization skills. The education process was completely different, and now they're going back to a more traditional, but an even more demanding educational system at the college level. So this anxiety that college students have is real. And unfortunately, most college students or college universities will say they have pet therapy, but they typically only show up twice a year. And that's during exams. And that's the perfect solution if you think college students only have anxiety during exam times. And we know that's just not correct. So what I'm encouraging colleges and universities to do is to implement a full-time pet therapy program. And in order to do that, we need the participation of students that have dogs, faculties that have dogs, and staff members that have dogs. And so I've been visiting universities to, number one, introduce them to the concept of pet therapy, why it's so important, but also to explain why they need to do it themselves. Because a campus is a unique facility. It's got its own personality. And so what we want to do is make sure that whatever design we come up with from a pet therapy full-time program is that it's going to fit their community, fit their campus needs and interests, so that they can then begin to do it on a much more full-time basis instead of just twice a year.
Yeah, that's a beautiful vision. I'm far away from college, but I have a son in college now, and my eldest also went through, and it really would make such a huge difference. I remember when I was in college, they didn't allow pets. Like, you couldn't have a cat. I think you could have, you could get away with having maybe a rodent or having a gerbil or something without them knowing about it. But it is something that needs to be changed. So I'm curious, you're at Midlife, right? So when did this incredible vision happen? I feel like you are really have this beautiful mission to quadruple the number of certified teams in the United States. How did that come about for you?
Well, it's been a long process. Scrappy passed away in 2019, and through her passing, I started writing notes, and then those notes became letters, and those letters became stories. The writing became my therapy, and I shared some of these ideas with friends. They encouraged me to publish the book, and since then, since the book has been published, I've just been doing research and finding out what the needs are, where they lie, and where we can have the greatest impact. And so I was in Denver, Colorado with a pet therapy organization out there called Pet Partners. And the lady that runs that organization said, Larry, she goes, we're one of the largest in the country. We have 300 team members. And I said, wow, that's huge. She goes, I could have 1,300 and still be turning requests away.
Wow.
And so when I began to understand that and asking, where are you turning people away? It was really in large population centers, college campuses, large corporations are being turned away too, because they want to focus on where they can have an immediate impact and in a much more smaller community. So that's what inspired me to begin thinking about where we can have the biggest impact, where the greatest need is, because in addition to a 65% overwhelming anxiety feeling that students have, there's also a 40% national dropout rate. So if we can incorporate these kind of programs, number one, we can heal these students, make them feel better about themselves and life in general, and maybe we can retain them as students. We don't want these individuals to drop out of school. We need to keep them in school. And I think pet therapy can be part of that solution as well.
It is also a wonderful thing if people are listening. Volunteering makes you feel so good. And I know, I would say pretty much most of my midlife clients have a dog. And just people are always thinking, what can I do? And there's so much research around volunteering, around being kind, beyond what we know about connecting with our animals. So what are some of the best breeds? If people are listening and going, well, I don't know if I've got the right dog for it, how do we sort of figure out, like I'm saying with Rosie, because she's super high energy. She's a great dog. She likes people. She doesn't have an aggressive bone in her body. She's super sweet, but she is sort of high energy, and she knows basics. Like she'll come, she'll sit when she's in the mood, but how do we know if we've got the right temperament, the right breed, or some breeds better than others?
I think that's a great question. Number one, I tell people there is no perfect breed. I think all dogs and all animals have a place and a purpose, but the temperament is the main thing. And even for your high-strung dog, one of the unique areas that pet therapy is gaining in popularity is sports teams. So university sports teams, some of them have their own pet therapy dog. The University of North Carolina baseball team has a golden retriever. So in your situation, maybe being able to go out onto that field and throw a ball and
Frisbee.
just have a retrieve. Yeah, just have a retrieve it and come back is going to be sufficient to, entertain, make them feel better, take some of that stress level off of their shoulders as well. But I just think any animal that has a calm temperament that is going to be around, whether it's children or seniors, it is really just going to be ideal. I don't know that there's a breed. Probably the most popular breeds, though, are going to be the Labradors, the Golden Retrievers. That type of breed is probably the most common that you see. Huskies, I see a lot of Huskies in pet therapy as well. Scrappy was a 5-pound mix of a toy poodle Chihuahua, and she sat on my arm. And so that was the best way for her to get around and be petted.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for inspiring us. I've got some food to think about with that. I know I've seen also, I do some hospice volunteering, and their pets are really powerful there, where people aren't feeling like they're getting cuddled and touched. And fortunately, the hospice house where I volunteer actually allows people to have their pets, which is super cool. So we have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
Nancy, I would love for you to ask Larry a question. Do you have a question for Larry?
It's interesting with the sports teams. I had to look up the name on my phone. My spouse is a alumni of Texas A&M, and they have Reveille, the dog mascot.
Collie,
and he was in the Corps of Cadets, and they actually part of the Corps, or section of the Corps, is responsible for taking care of her. And this dog is so loved that, I mean, they talk about him. They talk about this dog all the time, and so it makes me think how I think this information has been there, but you are bringing it to the masses. I was really curious to see if the people that you have worked with in the therapy field, with, for instance, like students, have you ever had someone come back to you and say, this dog changed my life? Because of this dog, I decided to go into veterinary medicine or whatever. Have you had people come back to you and say, oh my God, this changed my life?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just one, it's not two, honestly, hundreds of students have made this kind of comment, whether it's someone that had to convince her school administration she needed a dog for emotional purposes. So this emotional support dog, they granted her permission to keep it on campus with her, go to class with her. That's a little bit different than just general pet therapy, but it's just that human animal bond relationship. And many students have said, not only has it saved my life, it's made my life better, because they were willing to literally just let themselves emotionally undress. And we're beginning to see where therapists are using dogs and animals in their offices because they find that someone is more willing to talk to an animal than a human sometimes, particularly when it comes to sensitive issues that are troubling them inside and they don't know how to express. And so the animal becomes that medium, that place where the human has the opportunity just to really open up, and it accelerates the healing process. That's the other interesting things that therapists are saying too, is that, they can come and quote, sit on the couch all day long. But when that animal comes into the room, the dynamics change and the atmosphere in the room changes. And when I make talks, that's one of the things I try to do is I say, we could talk about pet therapy all day long. I'm happy to do that. But the best thing to do is experience it. So I coordinate with local pet therapy groups, and they then enter the room. And you can just sense the change in the atmosphere. And I like to tell people about pet food commercial. And the pet food commercial shows a little girl in a hospital bed with her mother. And the nurse comes to the door and says, or the little girl stretches her arm out. She goes, I know, more therapy. And she goes, no, we're going to do something a little different this time. And in comes the dog right up to the bedside. And her face, it's just magical. It's absolutely beautiful. But that's what happens with pet therapy. You'll never have an experience where someone says, oh, no, get that away from me. It's quite the opposite. It's very engaging. It's very loving. It's very sharing. And therapists and students alike love this opportunity to make sure that they can participate in it.
Yeah,
And if
so
I could-
incredible. Oh, go ahead, Nancy.
Can I ask one more question? And it just came to me while you were speaking. What other area do you see a need for it? So we're talking about schools and, police have them now, other areas, but what is one area, if you could, anywhere that you could have animals, where would you put them?
Well, for me, I'm focusing on two areas, and I've explained one, college campuses. The other area that I'm going to focus on, and this is really the answer to your question, is corporations. Why not have pet therapy at your office? Because as high anxiety as college is, so is the performance in the office. And so if you have that opportunity just to take a few minutes of your day and just kind of, again, have that experience of petting a dog, knowing that your body is truly going to change inside, and then get back to your desk, you're going to become more productive. Things are going to evolve a little bit better. Maybe some anxiety between employees is going to divert and just make the whole workplace a little bit stronger.
Yeah, wonderful thing is it's just so interesting bringing it full circle of how pets make us more human. We are animals ourselves. And I think pets remind us of our humanity, and especially these days where there's so much artificial intelligence and so much disconnection with, I guess, our devices where we're on our phone, where we can connect with our pets. So thank you both so much for being here today. I have had such a great time getting to know both of you and your work. Nancy, real quick, where can people connect with you?
On my website, nancymello.com. That's MELLO.com. I'm on TikTok at nancy.mello and on Instagram, Nancy Mello Official.
Okay, go to nancymello.com. And Larry, if people want to, they're listening, they're thinking, okay, I'm ready to do this with the Become a Pet Therapy team, where do they reach out to you?
Website is the best place. It has the resources and all the social media, but the website address is ataleoflove.com. TAIL. ataleoflove.com.
All right, ataleoflove.com. Thank you both so much for being here. Thank you all for listening. Go hug your pet. Think about becoming a pet therapy team. And I'll catch you next week. I'm Dr. Ellen, the Midlife Whisperer. Thanks again for being here. Midlife can be challenging. You may be sandwiched between growing kids and aging parents, dealing with menopause or a health issue, and trying to find work-life balance. Or maybe your life looks good on the outside, but inside you're feeling stuck and wondering how to get your confidence, energy, and joy back. Hi, I'm Dr. Ellen, the Midlife Whisperer, and I hear you and I've got you. Think of me as the one-stop shop for all your midlife needs. I'm a psychologist, registered dietitian, nutritionist, board-certified health and wellness coach, and mindful self-compassion teacher. I'm also an author and podcast host with over 30 years of experience empowering midlife women. I provide inspiration and wisdom to help you transform your health, your mindset, your relationships, and your life so you can rock midlife.